Good morning or good afternoon, depending on the time of day where you're joining us. I'm Al Folsom, Chief Performance Officer at Exemplary Performance, and today I'd like to provide an overview of some of our workshop materials and in a way that provides you with some value and capability. We'll also be providing each of you with a tool that helps you ask more powerful questions to achieve real results. So, as I started to begin, our goal today is to provide you with some practical content and tools that you can immediately use in your role. In that spirit, here's today's takeaways from our webcast. First, there is a mental model that people use when thinking and acting strategically. This model helps determine the questions that you'll ask. So we'll begin by reviewing that model. Next, there's 8 categories of root causes, and strategic work requires multiple solutions because there's usually multiple reasons why people are not performing as needed to achieve the desired business results. Next, there'll be how-to techniques for asking powerful questions. We want to ask questions that ensure that we assess a situation in a holistic manner. And next, 6 criteria that are used to determine if a project is going to be truly strategic. And finally, a tool with a starter set of questions to use in reframing discussions. We'll speak more about this tool near the end of our webcast. So again, today our goal is to provide you with techniques that you can apply right away when responding to managers who call with requests. So let's take first a little bit, just a couple of pieces of some research around this area. In the first quote that you see on your screen, we find most top execs want to see return on investment from the learning and development function. Overwhelmingly, they want to see this connection between what L&D does and the business impact. The next item that I wanted to show was from Burson and Associates, where even for a performance-driven learning function, of all the potential services they provide, performance consulting yields the one with the highest value. Now, when we talk about performance consulting adds value and drives results, we just wanted to share just a few examples of some performance consulting engagements and what the results from them were. So for this first one, this 150-person high-tech call center, we see following an engagement, there was a reduction in training from 16 days to 7 days. Okay, that is a reduction in cost and really is a way of making training more efficient. But the next number, 92% reduction in callback metrics, dropping from 25% callback down to 2%, that's not a training metric. That is, in fact, a business result that the client was seeking and had real business impact. Again, a 2-week apprenticeship eliminated, a 4-month rookie ramp-up eliminated. Again, more efficient training, but the real impact, again, from this project was not just the callback metrics, but also a dramatic increase in customer satisfaction. In another example of a high-tech repair center, there was a 1,500% return on investment on improvements to this repair and calibration center. Now, this wasn't forecast or projected return on investment, but was done 3 years after the project. So the project cost $300,000, but for each of those first 3 years after implementation, after this performance consulting project, there was a savings of $5 million per year by the business. And then the third example I wanted to share was in pharma sales training, where, again, by taking this approach, there's a 30% reduction in new hire training. Again, great to have more efficient training, but the business metric is that there was stronger first-year performance from these graduates of this revised training than from those who had gone through the previous longer version of sales training. When we've looked at organizations who have a training focus, this is what we tend to find, that the actions and activities are about people acquiring job-relevant skills and knowledge. Success is measured in terms of effectiveness and efficiency of those learning interventions. And overall, there is a solution focus that's tactical in nature. In organizations where there's a performance consulting focus, what we find is that the drive is toward business and performance results. Success is measured with this formula we have of W, or worth, that is, worth being the return on investment, in which we're taking the business value of the initiative divided by the cost of those interventions. Additionally, with the strategic focus, it remains a solution-neutral project for some period of time as we work through what are the multiple causes. So let's throw up a little bit of a pop quiz. And so as we've indicated, our goal here is to identify strategic projects on which we can partner with our clients. And if we're going to work strategically, we need to first agree on what is a strategic request. So on the screen, we've got two requests from clients. In your opinion, which, if any of these, are examples of a strategic request? And we'll just kind of do this kind of covertly or mentally without a polling question added in. So as you can see, each of these is a tactical request. Why is that? Well, there's no connection in these requests to the desired or required business impact. So other examples of tactical requests would be any type of learning solution, any request for a reorganization or of designing a compensation system or redesigning of processes or coaching structures. Those are all tactics. So let's take a look and see why this is the case. As we saw in those prior examples, the focus of each is on a solution. So tactical requests are situations where the client wants to discuss the solution rather than the business and performance needs. Enhancing leadership capability in that previous example, or implementing a new talent sourcing system, each of those are solutions. They're not the results. What we need to do is discover what are the business and performance results that the client requires through the questions that we ask. So here's an example of a strategic request. The request is strategic because, one, it focuses on a business result, in this case, to regain market share. A performance result is also identified, to have the right talent in place and aligned to deliver on the goals. It's solution neutral. It doesn't point to this one particular solution. The client's not called and asked the performance consultant to implement a particular solution. Rather, the client is seeking the performance consultant's assistance in determining what solutions are needed. To fast-track new products is not a solution. Rather, it's a strategy that will require multiple solutions to make it real. So let's take a look at the 6 criteria that are needed if the situation is going to qualify as strategic. So the first one is that if it's going to be a strategic opportunity, our focus needs to be on results, not solutions. It needs to be linked to one or more business needs. And it needs to be solution neutral for some period of time. The benefit of this kind of strategic work is also long-term in scope, 1 to 5 years typically. And it requires multiple solutions due to the fact that it's probably has multiple causes or factors that are inhibiting the performance that's required to attain that business result. And finally, the consultant and the client share accountability for the results. So let's take a second and have a polling question. And the question is this: to what degree does your function measure up or align to being able to deliver against these strategic requirements that we just reviewed? So you should be seeing the polling question coming up. And we'll just take another couple of seconds and see what the results are. Okay, so what we've got is that of our audience today, 7% say their organizations are completely aligned to deliver against these kinds of strategic requirements. 41% say mostly aligned. Another 40% say somewhat aligned, and 11% have indicated that currently their function is not aligned to be able to deliver against these. So we just have one definition that I'd like to go over with our group today, and that's this definition of performance consulting. So what is it? Well, it is a process, and I say that because processes mean it's something that's repeatable, and that's what we want our performance consulting methodology to be. It's also a case where our clients and consultants partner together to accomplish the strategic outcome of optimizing workplace performance in support of business goals. So that's the thrust. Now, again, where we are today is we want to link that to our purpose, which is we want to ask powerful questions so that we can help optimize workforce performance in support of these business goals. Now, there also happens to be this dilemma, if you will, because the client does come to us with a solution in mind. This tactical request that we have on the screen here, this in fact asking for a training program for managing customer complaints. In this case, there's a problem regarding customer satisfaction, and the client's coming to the performance consultant with a solution in mind, and a training program for customer service reps. And of course, that's frequently the case that our clients come to us with the solution in mind, yet there's also a high degree of probability that that solution as presented will be insufficient to yield the results that the client really seeks. In fact, sometimes the solution that's requested might not even be required at all. So the question is, how do we partner with the client and move away from a discussion on the solution that they've requested to a discussion about the results that the client needs without invoking the kind of reaction like we have pictured here? The key is to begin our questioning by focusing on the mindset of the client. But what does that mean? It means that we start with looking at the mental models that successful performance consultants use to get there. And here, it's the mental models used to ask powerful strategic questions. Now, pictured here is our need hierarchy. So this is the first mental model we want to briefly discuss. We need to begin our discussion with the client from their mindset, that is, what it is that they've presented to us. It means that we diagnose the request as presented to determine which need or needs within this hierarchy have been included. As you see in this graphic, the business need is the highest order need. Performance need is the second highest level, and the work environment and capability needs are the lowest level needs within the hierarchy. So here, what is the business need is an operational or strategic goals. An example might be to grow market share or to increase customer satisfaction or to reduce costs, but each of these would be measurable. They'd be numeric. For performance needs, this describes what people need to do on the job if the business needs are to be achieved. And the performance needs are those on-the-job accomplishments and supporting behaviors and practices that in turn will drive towards accomplishing the business needs. While the business needs focus on organizational entities, the performance needs focus on specific groups of people. So for example, if the organization need is that we must achieve revenue goals, then a performance need might be to identify what sales representatives must do more, better, or differently to make that happen. Perhaps they need to form strategic plans with key customer accounts. That might be the accomplishment and behaviors that are required as the performance need. Next, the inner box addresses the enablers of performance. And there's two categories of enablers. One is the work environment needs, which are the infrastructure that surrounds employees, helping them perform, or acting as barriers against the desired performance. The capability needs, which are the skills, knowledge, and attributes that people require to perform successfully. Now, because a deep understanding of the facilitators and barriers to performance is so crucial to understand as we ask these powerful questions, let's take a look a little bit more deeply at these 8 categories of root causes. So this successful on-the-job performance, excuse me, is really supported by kind of this 3-legged stool. And on the right-hand side of your screen is this first leg, which we call the capability needs. And these contain 2 categories of root causes: the skills and knowledge, and also the inherent capability. And the inherent capability, that can be attributes, characteristics, physical capacity, internal motivation, those things that we'd probably summarize by saying job fit. The second leg of this 3-legged stool, if you will, that supports on-the-job performance are the work environment needs. And we have 5 categories of those. So the first, clarity of roles and expectations, letting people know what's expected, having clarity of their role and responsibilities. The second one, coaching and reinforcement. Again, do they get coached on the job? Is there feedback? Is the feedback timely? Is it helpful? Are the incentives, number 3, are the incentives aligned to the right kind of performance result that we're seeking? Are there work processes and systems that support the work? And are they logical? Do they make sense? Are they easy to follow? Are there job aids and procedures that add and enable people to perform as they're required? The other resources that people need access to might be human resources, such as experts or second or third tier support, or it could be the job aids, or it could be the tools or software that's required to do the job. And then there's also other factors external to the organization that can impact on the job performance, such things as the competition or regulation or the economy itself. So with this, we have 8 categories of root causes for why people don't perform. And clients typically come to us with a single solution in mind, such as training or a reorganization. The probability that a single solution that's requested will, by itself, solve the problem is pretty low. As performance consultants, we must ask these powerful questions that will disclose what are the root causes for the client's current situation. So where we're at now is we've kind of laid that foundation for asking powerful questions. We need to be clear in our own mind what qualifies as a strategic opportunity. We need to analyze requests from clients to determine what's the highest level need that they have provided to us. And this is where the discussion will begin, and what's meant by start with the mindset of the client. So in reframing, this is the flow. So it's the outward flow. They come to us with a solution in mind that's probably touching on the work environment or a capability need, and we want to flow that discussion outwards so that we can get to the outer boxes of performance needs and business needs that the client seeks. And there's really 2 techniques that we're going to use to reframe this discussion. The 2 techniques are the GAPS logic of starting with the client's mindset and then asking powerful questions. So the GAPS logic is this. It's this mnemonic of go for the should, analyze the is, pin down the causes, and then select the right solutions. And it is a sequential idea. So go for the should is that there are business should questions around what should the operational numbers be, and there's performance should questions around the on-the-job accomplishments and supporting behaviors. Now, as an example, maybe our focus is on, say, project managers, and let's say there's a need to reduce costs and deliver high quality. So a business should question related to project managers might be, what are your targets for cost reduction? And a performance should question could be, if you could think of your best project manager for a moment, what does that person do more, better, or differently to achieve the cost and quality targets? When we get to the analyze the is, we're looking for information about the current state. So again, two categories of information that we want to explore. The business is question is frequently asked in relationship to the business should question that we just discussed. So let's say our business should question involved that information around cost and quality goals. Our business is question could then ask, so how is the organization currently performing in relationship to these cost and quality targets? The performance is question that focuses on behavior, and again, it's frequently asked in relationship to what we learned regarding the performance should. So in our previous example, once we know what the best project manager does to meet cost and quality targets, we could ask, well, how do your typical project managers perform? What specifically are they doing? And then next, we want to go to pin down the causes. So in the center box, we noted that the two categories of cause that we want to discuss are the work environment and capability causes. These cause questions help us to know the reasons for the gaps between the should and the is, for both business and for people performance. So returning to our example, once we know the gaps in performance, we could ask, well, what are the reasons for the gap between what project managers need to do and what you're observing them doing today? If we want to understand what is challenging the business from achieving its goals, we could ask, well, what's making it difficult to achieve the cost and quality targets that have been established for the organization? We need to ask the cause questions for both performance and the business because the answers we'll get will be different. Typically, when we ask cause questions about a performance issue, we'll obtain barriers that relate to people's capability and also in the work environment. When we ask the cause questions about the business, we often obtain information about external factors, such as the competitive forces or new regulations or even the economy itself. We want to develop a complete picture, so we need to ask cause questions for both performance and for the business. At this point, now we look to select the right solutions, whether that's work environment solutions or capability solutions. So while the S stands for solutions, we also need to realize that if we're going to talk about solutions, and we may not, it needs to be the last thing that we discuss with the client, not the first. Because if we haven't fully defined the gaps, how can we discuss the solutions? So let's kind of turn this client mindset thing into some action. So on the screen, we have this request from the client. So let's take a moment and identify which of the four needs in the hierarchy have been presented to you in this request. And we're going to do a polling question on this, but before we bring that up, let's kind of talk this through a bit. So have we heard a business need presented? Is there a performance need, a work environment, or capability need? What do you think? And then given what need or needs have been identified, which is the highest order need in the need hierarchy? Keep in mind that a business needs the highest order need and a work environment and capability needs, those are the lowest level. So if we're going to engage the client in a discussion that moves to a strategic area, we want to start with the highest level need that the client gave us. And that's what we mean by starting with the client's mindset. So let's take a look and see what our polling numbers look like. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, so the polling results show that about a third of our audience feel like they saw a business need expressed in the client's mindset. And so if we look at this, we did hear that customers aren't satisfied, and certainly that triggers us to think about some customer satisfaction numbers or metric. Now, we haven't heard those specifics, so in some way we haven't heard the business need expressed because we haven't heard, well, what is the goal or what is the current customer satisfaction. The performance need, we've heard that we want them to manage customer complaints, but again, we may wonder whether that's given us a true performance need. But again, what we want to do is be able to pick up on that when we respond back to them. About 3% thought that we had the highest level need expressed was a work environment need, and about 7% indicated they had a capability need as the highest level expressed in this client request. So where we want to go then is to take a look at these two techniques about where we go. So first, we want to look at how the GAPS logic will help us navigate this discussion, and then we'll discuss the techniques about powerful questions. So powerful questions are first open-ended. That means, they can't be answered with a simple yes or no, but rather we expect a narrative response from the client. Second, they're focused. And focused means that the question is directed to one of the specific categories of information included in the GAPS logic. So it's focused on just the business need, or it's focused on just the performance need. So we don't make it a complicated question that asks about all of the need hierarchy in one long question. We want to stay focused. And then third, it's solution and cause neutral. So as an example of that, let me put up two questions. In these two questions, the first one is solution focused. So when we ask what do CSRs need to do more, better, or differently after participating in a training program, we're already implying a solution with it. The second question is solution neutral. So what category of question is this? Is this a performance should or a performance is? Right. In this case, I'm choosing to start with a performance should question, and you should see that on your screen. So we're asking what it is that they would do more, better, or differently if, in fact, they were managing complaints effectively. And since this was a performance is question, or a performance should question, where would we want to go next in our follow-up question? If you said performance is, that's where we think we would go next, so that we stay focused on that part of this GAPS logic. We could follow up with a performance is question like, well, how does that compare with what you observe CSRs doing now when they respond to customer complaints? And note what's true about these questions. They're open-ended, they're solution and cause neutral, and they're focused on only one area of the GAPS logic. So when we get our client's response, we could then transition to another type of question. So what category of question is this? Right, we have a cause question. And this type of question is particularly useful. It's actually pushing back on the solution of training to determine, well, what else might still get in the way of solving customer complaints? We want to discover which of those 8 categories of root causes displayed in that GAP Zapper that we went through a little earlier might still be a factor in this situation. It's possible also that the client will acknowledge uncertainty as to what else might be a barrier. They might also acknowledge that this would be helpful to know. In this manner, what we're doing is we're raising questions that the client didn't know that he or she had, but now would like to understand. This is one of the ultimate benefits of asking powerful questions. So those cause questions are highlighted in yellow, internal to the organization questions and internal to individuals questions. So we've discussed the 2 techniques, GAPS logic and the questions that are powerful. Now what we want to do is integrate those 2 techniques and illustrate how reframing meetings actually occur. And there's 3 steps that we go through to put these techniques to work when we're conducting a reframing discussion. There we go. That's why we call this the 1, 2, 3 process of reframing tactical requests. So again, our reframing goal is to transition the discussion away from a focus on a solution and instead to a discussion about the business and performance results that are required. So, step 1 is to prepare. After you determine the highest level need that's been presented by the client, you work on your list of starter questions. And those starter questions should be 6 to 8 questions that you'll move around with the different categories of questions that you want to explore. So we'll want to have some starter questions about the business should and the business is, the performance should and the performance is, and some cause questions that we want to ask. It's important that we realize we're only preparing a starter kit of questions, which means that we'll be asking additional questions in the discussion with the client based upon the responses or the content that we learn from the client. These additional questions are one that we really can't create ahead of time, but they must be created in kind of the real life of the meeting. As I mentioned earlier, at the end of today's session, everybody will receive our tool, the Powerful Questions Job Aid. So in our preparation, we want to, again, analyze that question, the request that the client's provided, and determine what was the highest level need, and also form some starter questions and the logic that we're going to use in managing the discussion. So let's go on to the next. So now we're actually in the midst of conducting the meeting. And these reframing sessions are typically 30 to 45 minutes in length, and they usually occur either face-to-face or over the phone. Our first question is one that links directly to the highest level need that the client provided in the request. We'll want to probe and ask some follow-up questions as well to explore that information that the client's provided. When we're ready to move to the second category of information, we might ask the question we have prepared in that new category. And then, once again, we'll ask some follow-up questions and additional probing questions based on the responses that the client's provided. Now, there's 2 primary logic paths that we can use. In the first, we start on the performance side of the GAPS logic and move around the boxes. So what's that look like? So if we listen to the client's request and we realized they've mentioned something about a performance need, that was the highest level need that they expressed in their request, we'll want to connect with the mindset and ask our first question from this performance side of the GAPS map. Once we explore this yellow area on this side, we'll then transition over to the business side of the gaps map. The other possibility is that in the original request, maybe there was something expressed about the business need. Our customer satisfaction numbers have been dropping, and therefore we need some training for our customer service reps. Well, the highest level need expressed was a business should, or a business is rather, because our customer service metrics are dropping. We'll want to ask more about that customer service numbers, what's the current state, what's our goal, and again, move around the yellow side of the gaps map to explore those other questions. Once we've done that, now we can transition over to the performance side and ask questions on the performance side of the map. After our discussion with the client, we want to summarize what's known and what's unknown. So this is where we're also going to determine how to proceed. So as we summarize what's known and what's unknown, we look to see if the client sees the need to obtain additional information. So for example, what exactly are our best performers doing more, better, or differently? Or they see a need to get more information about other causes or other barriers to performance. In this case, we might be on the path to proceed strategically. But sometimes clients might say, we don't have information about a number of factors, but we need to get this training implemented as soon as possible, and I'm comfortable moving in that direction. Well, then perhaps we still need, we'll need to proceed tactically. And finally, discussion might lead the client to say, you know what, we need to hit the pause button on this because I realize this training's not going to solve this issue alone or perhaps at all. We just need to put things on hold for now. The other thing that we need to underscore at this point is that not all projects will be handled strategically, nor should they. For each of us as performance consultants, handling tactical work and delivering with excellence is one of the requirements we have to prove ourselves and to be able to subsequently engage at a more strategic level. Even so, connecting with the client mindset and asking powerful questions while we use this GAPS framework opens up the conversation to consider other areas that will need to be addressed to enable successful performance, even in tactical projects. So sometimes just getting the client to focus on what people will need to do more, better, or differently is tremendously powerful. So as we take a look, so what's our research been around how things end up following a reframing session? So as I mentioned, not all requests can or should be considered strategic. And in fact, what we found is that 10 to 20% of the time, the answer is we're not going to do anything right now, no further action, because the clients realized they're not ready to go. Training at this point is not going to solve it, or it's going to be costly. There's other things that need to be addressed, and they need to kind of regroup. But 30 to 50% of the time, as a result of these reframing discussions, the client realizes, hey, there are some other things we need to do in addition to perhaps just training. We need to explore some other causes for these barriers to performance and other things that we'll need to address if, in fact, we're going to be able to be successful at hitting the business results that the organization needs. And then sometimes the remainder of our stats say these projects do remain tactical. Now, there's also another possibility, which is that sometimes we end up with a scenario that's both strategic and tactical. For example, let's say we're being asked to fill open positions because of high turnover. Well, in the interim, we may still fill the positions, which is a tactical solution, while at the same time we begin determining what are the root causes for this turnover, which is a more strategic approach. So after our what I want to say is that our aim here is to have a discussion with our clients that are about results and not about solutions. And it comes about because of the questions that we ask. And this really is our ultimate goal, to help the client answer questions that they didn't even know that they had, which are critical to answer in order to achieve their goal. So the tool that we're providing is designed to do just that, to provide you with questions that you could ask in a discussion with one of your clients, keeping in mind that it's a combination of both the GAPS logic and the powerful questions that yield the greatest success. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is kind of, with some of our remaining time, transition a bit and invite you to use the panel on your screen to ask any questions that you might have. And just type in the area on your console like it's pictured on the slide on your screen, and we'll see what questions folks might have. Okay. All right, looks like we have our first question. The question is, what tips do you have for trying out the powerful questions the first time with clients? Well, the first time, first I'd say, see if you can try this out with a client that you already have a good relationship, because that'll make you more comfortable, and it'll be with a client that's hopefully more open to trying new things. The second thing is, remember to prepare the starter questions. Can't emphasize that enough. If we kind of just jump in and try this out, and we haven't done any kind of preparation, that's kind of spells, you know, probability for disaster, and we'll leave and say that didn't go how I wanted. Even if our client gives us a call and says, hey, can you come down, I want to talk about some training, if you can beg off for like 10 or 15 minutes, and most people will honor that, take those 10 to 15 minutes to try and come up with a few starter questions and have that preparation before you go in there. The third thing that I think about for when we're first trying things out is consider bringing a colleague along with you, because I think the first time we try to use the powerful questions and the GAPS logic, we're really trying to focus on what we're asking, and having another set of ears there to take notes and make sure that we're capturing what it is that our client's telling us is really a good idea. All right, let's take a look, see what other questions we might have. Let's see. As a leader in the learning function, what should I do to help my team operate more strategically? Well, first thing, as a leader, one of the first things that comes to mind is to model the approach. So a lot of times, leaders of the learning function have a different level of client interaction, and so you can model this approach for your folks. At the same time, by modeling that with more senior level clients, you're kind of helping that client organization open up to this type of dialogue in subsequent discussions with your performance consultants. Another thing that comes to mind is about accountability and support. So again, when we're just thinking about those barriers to performance, do we have alignment in what we are asking our folks to do? So if we say we want you to be more of a performance consultant when engaging our internal clients, and then, you know, kind of their performance appraisals are still standard training metrics around how many courses did I design, how many courses did I deliver, how many students went through my workshops, and, you know, did I reduce the amount of training time, and those are the things that we're measuring, then that's kind of out of alignment with where we're saying we want to go with a performance consulting approach. And maybe one other thing might be to help make those introductions for our performance consultants. Maybe take them along with you to be the ears that I mentioned about, some tips for first time out. So they can be there to see you role model this approach. At the same time, they can be taking notes, and they can be getting more acquainted with some of the clients. Let's see. One of the questions we have here is, if your peers would rather ask from a static list of questions, what would be the best way to persuade them to use GAPS? Well, I think it's a little bit of that picture that I showed earlier on about alienating the client. What happens is a client comes to us and says, hey, I need a 2-week training course for our customer service reps, need it next month. Are we prepared to deliver that? What do you need to be able to get that going? Well, if I have a static list of questions and I kind of proceed, sequentially, and I respond to that by saying, well, what does your profit and loss statement look like for the last quarter? Well, the client's going to say, what? Where are you coming from? So this is why in the reframing we want to be able to connect with the client mindset and start. In that case, they hadn't mentioned anything about a business need, so our first question out should not be about a business need. It should be on the performance side of the GAPS map, and in that case, we'd say, well, what is it that you're observing those customer service reps doing today that leads you to this idea that we need to develop them more fully? As they answer that, we can transition and say, well, do you have anybody who's doing the job really well today, some stars? And maybe we can get some insights about how that can be done effectively from those stars. And then we can transition to the business side at that point by saying, okay, so if we're able to get people performing like those stars, what kind of impact will that have on the business? Are there metrics that we'll be able to see move as a result of that improved performance? And so in that way, we've moved to the business side of the GAPS map and address business needs, and we haven't done it by alienating the client. On the other hand, kind of the sequential list works well if we're having a proactive discussion with the client. They haven't come to us with a request, and we just want to come and say, hey, we're planning our next year, and we'd like to understand your top initiatives and the business drivers for them. Well, in that case, we might be able to get permission to kind of go in that top-down sequential manner. But most of the time, our clients come to us with a tactical solution in mind, and we need to figure out how we're going to connect with their mindset. All right, let's see. How do you keep your partner committed to seeing out the plan and solutions? Great question. And I think if we go back to an earlier slide about what are the criteria for a strategic project, it talks about both the client and the consultant partnering and being accountable for the results. So if you think about it, if in our reframing discussion we come upon the business needs, hey, this is what our client, this is what they're on the hook for. They're not on the hook for training, they're on the hook for getting these business results. And if through this discussion, through the GAPS logic, we're able to help them connect the dots between solutions, causes, people performance, and business results, then it's a much higher probability that they'll stay the course and be our partner for getting those solutions. On the other hand, if it's really not a strategic project, if we don't have access to the true client who is accountable for those business results, then it's likely a tactical project, and we're probably going to just feel frustrated by trying to constantly energize them to look at these other solutions that are out of our area of the business and in their area or somewhere else, and for them to do something. Let's take a look, see what other questions we have. So if the client doesn't want to go further in the discussion and wants to implement training anyway, are you recommending to help them with that as a tactical solution rather than pausing to move forward with a strategic solution? Well, a lot of times, as our statistics that I showed a little bit earlier bore out, there's a number of times when proceeding tactically is the thing that we need to do. Part of that, again, as we proceed tactically, there's a few things to keep in mind. One is, if we're able to answer questions about what it is people need to do more, better, or differently, we've already had a pretty big win for a lot of organizations, because in a lot of places, the solution is, I need you to teach them X, Y, and Z, these skills and knowledge. And there really hasn't been a discussion even about performance. So if we're able to get our client thinking about on-the-job accomplishment and performance of people, we've already made some great progress. Secondly, there's some things that we can do even when proceeding tactically to help identify other potential barriers that might be able to be addressed along the way. So kind of that yes and approach. Yes, we can proceed tactically, and I'd like to explore some of the other causes for why people might not be performing as needed. Let's see if I think we have time for another question. Some clients may initially not want to speak to results, but rather jump to solutions. How do you guide a client back to the results conversation? Great question. And really what we're saying is that we think most clients initially don't want to talk about results. Most clients might initially just want to jump to solutions. That's kind of how they come to us. And part of that is, how do they perceive us? Do they perceive us as a pair of hands that have provided tactical or even transactional kinds of solutions for them? And so if that's how they see us, it shouldn't be a surprise that that's kind of how they show up. And so part of that is through this reframing. It really, that's the point of reframing, is to be able to bring up the results that they want. And oftentimes, if the initial client mindset is on the very tactical solution, it says that we're going to have to start on the performance side of that gaps map and work our way up there to transition over and say, so if we're able to get people to perform as you've described, what kind of impact will that have? How will you know it? How will you be able to measure it? What will you be able to see? How will that benefit the business? And so that's what I think is one of the ways that we can get that client back to the conversation around results. All right, let's see, maybe one more. What level can these work? C-level, program level, staff level, or said otherwise, decision maker, stakeholder, or influencer? Well, I mentioned a little earlier about getting access to the true client. So sometimes what we get are what we call client contacts. So the client contact is from the business side of the organization, but really they're only on the hook to get the training scheduled and completed. So if that's who we're talking to, again, back to our criteria for proceeding strategically, we've not met that criteria, and we really don't have the strategic opportunity in front of us, because that client contact does not have the same accountability for those business results. And so in that case, what we want to try to be able to do is to be able to get access to the true client. Some of the ways for getting there include, being able to deliver with excellence on those tactical projects that we've had. Being able to get introduction. Someone had asked about what can I do as a leader of my function. Well, trying to get perhaps our leader to get us that kind of access or that kind of introduction to the true client, so that we can have those kinds of discussions. Sometimes building our relationships with the client organization by understanding their initiatives, understanding their terminology, what are their drivers, what are their business issues, not just what are our training issues and what's the latest trends in learning and development, but what are the things that are occupying their time and resources on the business side. So the more that we're able to engage them about the business, the more that they're able to engage us more fully to explore more areas. I think we might have another minute here. Company is directed that we cut the cost of training across the board. How can we ensure the effort adequately evaluates the consequences? Well, I think part of that is in our discussions when we develop training as a result of a strategic project. It's very easy to demonstrate our return on investment because we've made that linkage at the very beginning before we've developed the training. Where we have some of our greatest frustration, I suppose, in the learning and development world is when we try to retrofit some kind of a measure on our return on investment from our training after the fact, and when we do it on our own. And what happens is it tends to really lack credibility with the business because, well, training came up with those numbers. But if we've been able to have this conversation that reframing conversation at the beginning and make these linkages between people performance and business results and got the client to say, yeah, I see that if we can get our customer service reps performing more like our star customer service reps, that will have an impact on our customer satisfaction ratings. I believe that. I see that. It makes sense. And that's really what we need. So if as a result of that, we've developed some solutions that include a training solution as well as other barriers that were identified through this assessment, when those customer satisfaction numbers turn, we've won an ally on the business side that says, yeah, I see the value in this approach because it bore itself out in our numbers. Well, we're right about at the top of the hour. Let me click to our next page on our deck here. This is just a picture of the tool that we're going to be emailing out to you. It's a PDF file. It has questions that are written in generic language. So it's going to be important for you to use your client's language and terms when actually conducting a reframing discussion. But our goal here is that this tool will provide you with some of the starter ideas for questions that you can ask. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. We've got contact information up here on the screen about the workshops that we do. As you can tell, we've got a lot of passion about this kind of work. And again, we'd be delighted to hear from you, whether that's follow-up questions or any kind of discussion. Thank you so much again for joining us. And this is Al Folsom. Very much appreciate your time and attention today. Thank you.